us again here at Elmwood Park Zoo from wherever you are today. I just want to give a huge shout out to our friends from Stony Brook Elementary School who were supposed to have their field trip here at the zoo today, and unfortunately because of our quarantine we had to cancel that. So I heard you guys are tuning in today, so thanks so much for joining us. It's pretty awesome to have you guys checking in virtually. Sorry you guys couldn't be here today, but we hope that you'll enjoy our Zoo School Live for today. Well guys, so my name is Marissa, and today I have two friends with me, and they're going to be a little all over the place. But my first friend here is Scooter. Scooter is a three-toed box turtle, and then we also have our other three-toed box turtle here. Her name is Urma, and she's deciding to go for a wee bit of an adventure today. Now, it's really important here at the zoo that we get some of our animals outside, particularly those that might typically live inside for most of the year. So both Scooter and Urma live inside of our education building here at the zoo. They need to be in temperature-controlled environments because both of these guys are reptiles, which means that they need to rely on the outside world for their inside body temperature. So for these guys, we cannot keep them outside all summer or all winter long because they would just get absolutely too chilly. So during the nicer months, particularly come summertime and late spring, we try to get these guys outside and wandering about the zoo as much as possible so they can get some natural UV light, which is so very important to our reptile friends. Now, Scooter here, he is 28 years old, or turning 28 this year, which is pretty awesome. And you know, we just kind of bring these guys out in a safe environment and let them just kind of cruise around. Box turtles in particular love to wander and adventure. So these guys are doing just that. So a lot of times box turtles have certain predators, like things like birds and hawks. So for these guys, we want to make sure that we're always out here watching them when they're out walking around, but you may see them try to go underneath of things. They might try to hide in the shade because they're hoping that they're not going to be seen by a hawk. Luckily they have us to keep a close eye on them, but you can see Scooter here. He's trying to hang out under that sidewalk area because he's like, man, I'm out of here. There might be hawks around. Particularly in our area, we do have red-tailed hawks. They're one of the most common birds of prey that we have here. But three-toed box turtles are typically native to South Central United States. They're actually the state reptile of Missouri, which is pretty cool. So Pennsylvania itself does not have a state reptile. I think we're trying to get our state amphibian right now, which is the Eastern Hellbender. If you've never heard of those guys, I highly suggest you check them out. They are super awesome. This here is Urma, and you can see she is trudging along. So our box turtle friends, they might be looking for shade or shelter or snacks. These guys will be cruising around a lot, almost all day, to try to forage. Box turtles are mostly active during the morning hours and then maybe into the evening. They're probably going to rest around midday time, especially in the summertime when it gets really warm. But these guys will do most of their moving around in the early morning and maybe later evening hours when the weather conditions aren't quite as harsh. Now they'll spend some of their day out basking, which means out hanging out in the sunshine, which is so important for turtles specifically. So turtles, they have a shell on their back, right? They're shelled creatures. They have a very hard, bony shell that's covered in these scales that we call scutes. And so these scales, if they get wet or damp, they could potentially harbor different kinds of bacteria. So by sitting out in the sunlight, that sunlight, the warmth of the sun, will actually help to kill off any bacteria that might be around, and also to make sure that they stay nice and healthy. Now, not only does it do that, but it also helps them warm up their internal body temperature, right? So our reptile friends, they run about the same temperature as the outside world. So to warm up, they need to sit out in the sun, and to cool down, they need to hang out in the shade. So we're just bringing these guys out for a little bit of daily exercise. It's also really important for these guys to move around. Box turtles can inhabit an area that's something like 25 square miles. So they can do a lot of walking in a day if they really want to. So for these guys, they're going to be moving around a lot. Now, Irma is our female resident box turtle here. She is turning 22 years old this year, which is pretty cool. Now, both of these guys can actually live to be maybe even 100 years old. And we're really hoping that they live nice long lives. Now, for these guys, both Scooter and Irma, they are, for the most part, we think that they're 22 and 28, and that's what we celebrate their birthdays as. But for both of these guys, there's a chance that they're even older than that because they're both rescue animals. So Irma actually came from a wildlife shelter where she was likely released or rescued there because someone probably had her as a pet at home. And Scooter here, the one that I'm holding in my hands, he was unfortunately surrendered as well. Now, something you might notice about my feet, very tiny. So he can fit entirely on the palm of my hand. And that's because Scooter here, unfortunately, although his previous owners may have loved him an awful lot, they were not able to fully give him the things that he needed. So Scooter suffered from something called metabolic bone disease. And that just means that he did not get the proper lighting and heating or nutrients that he needed to be able to grow healthy, strong bones. So turtles need an awful lot of calcium and UV light to help make sure that they are able to grow nice, strong bones. And unfortunately, in Scooter's case, he never got those things. So he stayed very, very small, and it caused him permanent bone damage. And he has some permanent shell damage here as well, which is likely because of that, that bone disease that he received growing up when he was younger. Now, one of the ways that we can tell that Scooter here is a male box turtle, we have a few indicators. So first off, with three-toed box turtles, just to give you a little bit of an idea, they do have 3 toes on their little back feet, whereas something like an eastern box turtle is going to have more. They're going to have 4. And so these guys have those 3 little toes on the back, and that's how we know that he's a 3-toed box turtle. Now, the males are going to have this brighter coloration. They're going to have more orangey reds, yellows, right around their arms and their neck and maybe even on their face, whereas the females here, and we'll get Miss Irma, the females, even though she has some on her face, she doesn't have too much of those bright colors. She's that kind of standard tan color on her arms. And you can see Scooter here, he is much smaller in comparison to our friend Irma, who's more of a normal size for a 3-toed box turtle. Now, these guys are both considered to be box turtles, and you may have remember when we met Dude early on that he was a box turtle, and he's a little different. He was an eastern box turtle. Our friend Irma and Scooter here, these guys are both 3-toed box turtles, right? And we know that because of these 3 toes, but also they're both box turtles because of this hinge on their bellies, right? So for these guys, this hinge here, they're able to actually close up their shell by pulling in that hinge, and that's going to allow them to totally box up their shell, right? So that's how we know that these guys are box turtles. If Scooter gets startled, he's going to pull his little legs in, he's going to poke his nose in, and he's going to close up that shell. So that's one of the ways that we consider these guys to be box turtles. And there are several different box turtle species all throughout the world, which is super awesome. They are very, very cool, very adaptable animals. Now, Scooter and Irma, right, they are both considered turtles. These guys are not native to Pennsylvania. They do live a little bit further away. And these guys are going to live in more grassland, marshy areas. The box turtles that we have here in Pennsylvania are going to prefer forested environments. But both the eastern box turtle and the 3-toed box turtle, they're going to eat kind of the same thing. So for these guys, they're considered omnivores, which means that they are going to be eating just about anything that they find tasty. They're going to be eating fruits and veggies, and they're also going to be eating a lot of meat. So the kind of meat that they're eating are insects. They're going to eat lots of bugs, crickets, beetles, worms, all that good stuff is going to be some of their favorite snacks to eat. Here at the zoo, we feed them a tasty salad that's got all kinds of good stuff on it and supplements. And then as well, these guys are going to also be eating we here at the zoo, we feed them crickets, we feed them some worms, and that's going to make up a majority of their diet. Now, both of these guys can walk a very, very long time. So for these guys, they love to cruise around. You can see they really haven't stopped moving. Looks like Scooter's taking a break, but Irma here, she's going to keep cruising. They can walk a significant amount of time. And box turtles are specifically known to have this kind of homing beacon. That's just innate to them, which means they're just kind of born knowing where they're from and where they want to go. And we see this a lot in sea turtles too, right? A lot of sea turtles will be hatched on a beach somewhere, and they're gonna go off to sea, and then they'll find their way back to the same beach to lay eggs of their own years later. And you know, scientists are still trying to figure out how they're able to do that. It's like they have a pretty awesome internal GPS system, and we think that box turtles are pretty much the same. We think that a lot of box turtles have that same homing beacon that's just inside their brain, and they know exactly where they came from and exactly where they're going. So box turtles, we may not know where they're going, but they sure do. So it's pretty cool to watch them cruise around and to explore their environment. Now, I was talking a little bit about how, you know, our friends Scooter and Irma, they were both previous pets. Three-toed box turtles can be pretty easy to find as pets, but here in Pennsylvania, it is illegal to own them as a pet. And it's really important that no matter what kind of pet that you get, that you do all the research possible, right? Because a lot of times these guys are taken out of the wild, which is so not fair to them, right? We really wish Irma and Scooter were, you know, out living their best wild lives, but unfortunately, you know, since Scooter here has that metabolic bone disease, and Irma has been, you know, cared for by people her whole life, there's a good chance that they really wouldn't know what to do. So they'll probably live out the rest of their lives here at the zoo, getting lots of adventures and lots of great care. But it's important to make sure that these things don't happen in the first place. You know, we want to make sure that you're not taking animals out of the wild. So the next time you see a really cool turtle hanging out, maybe if you're going for a walk or around your neighborhood, definitely stop, check him out, observe him, just like we're checking out Irma and Scooter here today. But remember to leave them in their habitat, right? We really want to make sure that we leave those animals who are in the wild, and we want them to stay in the wild. There are plenty of animals that, you know, are able to be kept as pets, and that they don't come from the wild, right? They come from other people who have cared for them for a long time. They were maybe born in human care, but we want to make sure that when we see wildlife that we can observe from a distance, and we want to make sure that we leave them safely where they're from. So want to make sure we get to your questions here today, guys. So we'll see what kind of questions you guys have. So we're going to take these guys back over and let them cruise around in the grassy area, get them some more sun. All right, let's go, Scooter. All right, RJ wants to know how hard their shells are. Oh, RJ, that's a great question. So their shells are absolutely very, very tough. So I have some shells here to show you guys. So these shells were donated to the zoo. I never knew the turtles that these came from, but they're a great representation of these of turtle shells. So this big one here, this came from a snapping turtle, and you can hear it's pretty tough. It's made out of bone, which is the same stuff, right, that we have inside our bodies that keep us standing nice and tall. So this whole turtle shell is made out of bone. So you can see the inside of this turtle shell, the snapping turtle shell. We have this big backbone. So at home, you guys can reach back and feel your backbone. You should be able to feel some of that bony area. Maybe you can feel it up by your neck. That's all part of your vertebrae. And so these shells are super hard. It's really tough to crack them. So most of the time, they're safe from a lot of different kinds of predators. This shell here, you can see that white bone. You can see this shell was cracked. There's a chance that this animal was maybe hit by a car, or some hawks have created this, have figured out how to crack open turtle shells by carrying them super high up into the air and then dropping them from afar. And that helps to crack open to get the good stuff on the inside for those hawk friends. Now, this also shows these scoots on here, and you can see how these scoots are separate pieces and they lay kind of on top of the bone. Great question. All right, what's our next one?
Were they in the turtle race? That was from
were they in the turtle race? Yes, and Irma won the turtle race. I think Scooter just kind of sat there. He wasn't very good. But Irma was in the turtle race. Both of them were, and Irma won. She's our big victor.
Emily would like to know if they have different colors or patterns.
Ooh, Emily, that's a great question. So yeah, they absolutely do have different colors and patterns, and you can even see that in between Scooter and Irma here. You know, their patterning is a little bit different. You can see some of Scooter's pattern here. Remember, his shell was damaged because he didn't get all the good nutrients when he was growing up, but he still has some of the same coloration and patterning. Now, for our three-toed box turtle friends, they're going to stay kind of mostly this tan color. They're not going to be too colorful on their shell, but they absolutely will have slightly different colors and different patterns. Great question.
Joseph wants to know if they can ever leave their shells.
Oh, Joseph, great question. Thanks for reminding me, because I don't think I told you. But so these guys cannot leave their shells. They are attached, and so I don't know if you can see here, but has his head and his arms, and along here, all that skin is attached to his shell. See, it's all attached on the side here, and all along the back, and all along this side. So turtles are attached. It is part of their skeleton, and so they cannot come out of their shell. They're actually born with their shell, and as they grow older, that shell will grow with them.
Zoe would like to know what we should do if we see a turtle on the road.
Oh, Zoe, thank you for asking. So now that we're coming into late May and early June, you might see some turtles crossing the road. Now, there's a few things that I want you to keep in mind when we're talking about turtles crossing roads. If it's a safe road and you're with a grown-up, it is absolutely safe to try to help out a turtle. But remember that it's always important to put your safety first. Obviously, we want to make sure we protect turtles, but you know, it's always important to put your safety first. Don't go out into a road, you know, always look both ways, always make sure there's no other cars coming, and make sure you're always with an adult or a grown-up if you want to try to save a turtle. Now, a turtle like a box turtle, you want to make sure that you move them in the direction that they're going. So if Scooter is trying to cross the road, let's say our sidewalk here is the road, and you see him and he is going that way, you don't want to pick him up and put him back on this side, because what's he going to do? He's going to try to cross the road all over again. So you want to make sure that if you try to help a turtle out, you want to make sure that you gently pick him up and you put him on the other side of the road, right? And that's going to allow him to find whatever he's looking for and ensure that he's not going to try to cross the road all over again. Now, another important thing is that our friend Scooter here is a three-toed box turtle. He is going to be much more afraid of you than you are of him. If you come across a snapping turtle, I highly recommend that you have a grown-up help you and that you are very careful, because snapping turtles can cause damage. They can hurt you, so it's important to know what kind of turtle you're going to try to help move across the road. So always make sure to have a grown-up with you, and always make sure that you know what kind of turtle it is. If it is a snapping turtle, you want to make sure that you hold as far back to the back legs as possible to help him cross the road, because they do have pretty big chompers, and we want to make sure that you don't get your fingers bit.
Henry is wondering, what is the best place in Pennsylvania to see an eastern box turtle?
Oh, great question. So box turtles really love to be in forested areas. So I would say heavily forested areas, maybe some of your state forests here in Pennsylvania, probably somewhere where it's a little further away from people, but turtles you can find just about anywhere. Maybe not an eastern box turtle, might be a little tricky. They are very good at camouflage, and there's unfortunately not that many here in Pennsylvania. But whenever you go out maybe to a riverside or onto a lake or a pond, keep your eyes out on logs for turtles that might be basking. And the types of turtles you might be seeing are things like sliders and painted turtles that might be hanging out on logs alongside of on those ponds or lakes, moving around. And remember to bask their shell to get all those bacteria off.
Ian would like to know if they ever go in the water.
Oh, Ian, good question. So yes, these guys will go into the water. They might go into the water to look up to eat some small bugs or insects. These guys do typically like some marshy areas, our three-toed box turtle friends. But they won't go swimming. So unlike some of our other swimming turtle friends that you might see in those ponds or lakes, box turtles are not very good swimmers. So although they can swim, they're not going to do a lot of it, and definitely not in deep water. So these guys are going to maybe sit in shallow pools or shallow ponds to soak, but they're not going to be deep diving or swimming around like some of our other aquatic turtle species.
Mia wants to know if they can run to get away from predators. Or Maya.
Oh, great. So yes, they can do a little bit of running, but remember, it's not going to be cheetah speed running. These guys are just about as as fast as they're going to get is about as fast as you see them cruising now. So we'll put them back down, and we'll see how fast these guys can go. And even though they can be a little speedy, they're not going to be as fast as some animals. So I would say for predators, the first thing they're going to do is probably try to hunker down in their shell. It won't be their first instinct to try to run away.
What turtle is the biggest in the zoo?
So in the zoo, we have a gopher tortoise named Sandy, and she's definitely our largest turtle or tortoise that we have here at the zoo. But the largest turtle in the world is going to be your leatherback sea turtle. They are gigantic. I highly recommend you do a Google search of what a leatherback sea turtle looks like, because they are pretty large.
Right. Have the turtles laid eggs?
Yes. So Irma lays eggs almost every year, and they are infertile, so they are not going to be they're not going to hatch into baby turtles, but she does lay a few eggs every year. She lays about 2 to 3 eggs, but yeah, so they're not fertile, so they won't hatch into baby turtles, unfortunately. But our friend Irma here does lay eggs.
But these guys sink in deep water?
Yeah, so they would probably be able to tread water for a little bit, but they would not be able to swim long distances, and they would probably sink for sure.
Paige wants to know if their nails are sharp.
Hey Paige, so their nails can be a little sharp, and they definitely like to wiggle around. So they can scratch you a little bit, but they're not as sharp as some of our other animals that like to climb trees. They have really needle-like fingernails to help them dig into trees. But since these guys aren't doing a whole lot of climbing, their nails are, even though they can be a little pointy, they're pretty dull.
Evelyn and Lily are wondering why they have their noses on the top of their head.
Oh, good question. So their noses are kind of on the front of their face, similar to ours. It kind of looks like they're at the top of their head, but that just helps them when they're maybe soaking in a shallow pool. They can kind of just poke their head out and have those nostrils right up at the top. So that's probably an evolution thing, since our first kinds of turtles that ever existed were aquatic turtles, and then they needed to be able to poke their heads just enough out of the water to breathe. So having those nostrils right there probably helped them a long time ago in the prehistoric times of dinosaurs. So having those little nostrils up at the top there really helps them breathe, and is probably something that they carried on from millions of years ago. All right, so it looks like we have 2 more questions.
Preston would like to know how many eggs the females can lay and where they lay them.
Yeah, great. So the females are going to dig kind of a hole in the ground, or maybe a very shallow little divot in the ground, and they're going to lay somewhere between potentially 2 to, I would say, maybe like 4 eggs on average, and that's what they're typically going to lay in the wild. Certain turtles will lay different numbers of eggs. Certain turtles can lay much more. Certain turtles can lay somewhere between 1 to 15 eggs at a time. It all just depends on the species. But Irma, typically, when she lays her eggs every year, she lays about 2 to 3 eggs.
And Angelina wants to know what makes them different than a tortoise.
Oh, good question. So, unfortunately, these guys are kind of the exception to the rule, because they're a little bit of turtle and a little bit of tortoise. So, like a tortoise, they mostly live on land, but like a turtle, they're going to be omnivores. So they're going to be eating a lot more plants and veggies and meat, just like a turtle might. So they're kind of a little bit of both. So box turtles are almost the exception to the rule, where they're a little bit of turtle and a little bit of tortoise. So great question. Thank you guys so much for joining us here today on Zoo School Live. I hope you guys loved meeting our three-toed box turtle residents, Scooter and Irma. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to post them in the comments, and I'll try my best to get to them today and answer away. So thanks so much, guys. Be sure to stick with us tomorrow for another awesome animal friend.